Hello everyone, SlayerCoon here. The PS1 is a console I've shared my odd history with a little bit too much on my reviews. I grew up with the PlayStation late into its lifespan. I first played it around 2000 or 2001, and continued to play it until 2006. The PS1 died a very sad and painful death around that time, thanks in no part to the even bigger success of the PS2. Yet a lot of interesting games were released during this time that often get overlooked in the YouTube gaming scene. Today I'll be taking a look at a couple of notable games from the dying days of the PS1, ranging from 2001 until 2004 when the final game for the system was released. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Long before the Tony Hawk series became a mostly forgotten relic of gaming's past, it was a hugely successful series that inspired millions to actually attempt to skate in real life. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 was the first in the series to be released for the PS2, but it also had a PS1 port that was mildly successful and has gained a cult fanbase over the years. This game had the luck of being released in 2001 when the PS1 was still selling well, and this port of the game is really good, with fun, fast-paced gameplay and great level design. There are some assets reused from the previous game which feels pretty lazy, but overall this is a great version of Tony Hawk 3. 8 out of 10. Tony Hawk 4 for a long time was a rather forgotten game in the series, at least until 5. But did you know they made a PS1 version of it? Probably not, because it was released in late 2002 when the PS1 was on its last legs. This version of the game is barely even acknowledged by most people, and with good reason, because it's not very good. It still reuses assets from the previous games, which I could excuse for THPS3, but doing it twice makes the game feel like a copy and paste job. And I also didn't enjoy most of the goals in this game, nor the level design. This game feels more like a bootleg than an official Tony Hawk game, and is such a bad way to end off Tony Hawk's legacy on the PS1. 5 out of 10. NASCAR Thunder 2002. Growing up in the South back in the early 2000s, NASCAR was huge. Pretty much everyone from within the redneck demographic was a massive fan of it. Even I was a fan back then. But that was then. I have zero interest in this dying motorsport now, but I'll put that aside for a NASCAR game I have a strange nostalgia for. NASCAR Thunder 2002 was released in 2001. I'm emulating this since I don't have my original copy, so there will be some rather noticeable graphical glitches in the footage, like these blue Doritos in the sky. Considering this game is published by EA Sports, you'd probably expect me not to be kind to this game. Well, actually no, this game is shockingly decent. This game is highly impressive for a PS1 game, with such attention to detail such as skid marks on the tarmac, lens flare, cracked glass on the speed dials whenever you crash, and a highly detailed cockpit view. Some of the fictional tracks are so well made they wouldn't feel out of place on a Gran Turismo game, and they definitely steal the show in comparison to the real-life tracks. As a racing simulator, it does a pretty decent job, but the best part of this game is just screwing around and crashing into the other cars, watching your car fly 50 feet into the air, and seeing how many racers you can kick out of the race. It's the ultimate gaming guilty pleasure. NASCAR Thunder 2002 is a shockingly decent gem from the late years of the PS1, and you can find a copy for as little as $3. Although if you are looking for the definitive PS1 racing game, I would check out Gran Turismo 2 instead. NASCAR Thunder 2002 gets 7 out of 10. Super Bubble Pop. I've already talked about Super Bubble Pop before and how abysmal it is, but it bears repeating that this might be the worst game on the original PlayStation. Even for how bad Bubsy 3D was, at least that game had something going for it. A puzzle game about popping bubbles was a terrible idea that nobody asked for, and it flopped hard. Not only due to its late release in 2002, but because of how unremarkable it is. The PS1 post-2001 was a tear-jerkingly awful display of an ineptitude, and this game takes the cake as one of the worst. 2 out of 10. Gundam Battle Assault 2. This is a game one of my internet friends brought up when discussing late-life PS1 games. Gundam Battle Assault 2 was released in mid-2002. At first I thought that was because it was a downport of a PS2 version, but as it turns out, it was released only for the PS1, which is a pretty dumb decision since that greatly reduces sales. Had it been released just 1 year earlier, this could have sold decently. But instead of scrapping it and making a new game for the current console giant, they released it when the PS1 was no longer profitable. I can't rate this game since I haven't played it, but I would assume that it is a decent late-life PS1 game. It just so happens that this game isn't of my tastes. Austin Powers Pinball. Quite possibly the dumbest idea for a video game ever. Released in 2002, Austin Powers Pinball defies all logic in its existence. It's a game so lacking in content that it would barely pass for a 99-cent phone game on the App Store in 2019. Back in the early 2000s, everyone was playing pinball. On Windows XP. With the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube out on the market, nobody even cared about the PS1 anymore, so this game went mostly ignored, and was critically panned by those who knew of its existence. Even though I haven't played this game, I'm scoring it a 1 out of 10 due to how stupid this game is. Easily one of the worst games to ever be released for this system. And now we reach the end of the line. 2004. The PS2 is at the peak of its popularity, and PS1 games line bargain bins all over game stores due to low interest. Sure, the PS2 remained backwards compatible with PS1 games for its entire lifespan, but even then, interest in the PS1 was at an all-time low, and this would be the year where the last ever game for the PS1 would be released. FIFA Soccer 2005. The last game released for a console usually tends to be a sports game, and the PS1 was no exception. What you are looking at is the last dying breath of the PS1 in action. Truly a sad sight to see. The PS1 was one of the best-selling and most influential consoles ever, yet it died quite possibly the saddest death of any console during its dying years. For as much as I personally dislike the N64, at least that console ended with a fairly mediocre port of Tony Hawk 3 in 2002. The PS1 was on life support for 2 years after the N64's last release, and I had to grow up with a console during that time. All good things must come to an end, and video game consoles are no exception. And some of us have to grow up with dying game consoles and be mocked for playing them. But I guess it isn't all bad. Some kid out there is probably currently growing up with a PS1 classic as we speak.